Hello and welcome to Underdogs, Bootstrappers, and Game Changers. This is for those of you that are starting with nothing and using business to change their stars. Motivating people who disrupted industry standards. This is the real side of business. This isn't Shark Tank. My aim with this podcast is to take away some of the imaginary roadblocks that are out there. I want to help more underdogs because underdogs are truly who change the world. This is part of our Content for Good initiative. All the proceeds from the monetization of this podcast will go to charitable causes. It's for the person that wants it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Underdogs, Bootstrappers, Game Changers. And I've got another great guest for you today because I think the world needs more stories. And I think business can benefit off these stories. And like one thing I love about the younger generation, and people say what they want about them, is we now care who we buy from and who that business is. And that's why I think it's imperative you bootstrappers have a good story. So joining me today is Erin Rogers. She is the ultimate in storytellers. She's a writer. She's into comedy. She loves movies. And I welcome her today to Underdogs, Bootstrappers, Game Changers. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I also really love when people are like, oh, the younger generation, because it makes me feel like I am young because I'm 43 years old. I'm like, oh yeah, us younger generation people. Even if you're not saying that, I'll take it.
I don't get away with it very well anymore because all this is coming in, but I like to say this is years of business stress, which
it's dignity.
Yeah.
When you're a man, it's dignified.
There's like 6 different colors going on there now. So, but it's a good thing I'm not very vain.
No, it looks fantastic. And I think I should get a fake beard and just be like, listen, dignified.
This is real too. It's real. So, just putting it out there in the world. Speaking of real.
If you grabbed it and it was fake?
Like Santa Claus?
Exactly. That's the controversy of your podcast. It's like the beard was fake.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Dun dun dun. They come out of the audience somewhere. So
exactly.
How's that for a story?
With a big neck. I love it.
I want you to hash out for me how you got into storytelling because I do think it's imperative. Like, what would the world be without stories? And I get asked this a lot. So you tell me your take on that.
Sure. So I feel like this is the audience for it. I'm going to tell you part of the reason that I got into storytelling is because I was kind of an asshole. So what happened was I was doing a lot of stand-up and I had this thing where I was like, oh, I'm so funny and I'm like so real. And not all stand-ups were like that, are like that, but I was definitely like, that was my vibe. And I was doing like all this comedy and improv, which is a very weird thing to be like, I'm so cool, I do improv. Give me an emotion and a piece of fruit and I will perform a scene for you. Like, that's not, it's great, but it's not like a cool thing. But I was feeling very like, look at me. And a friend of mine who I was in an improv troupe with said she was doing a storytelling show. And when you're in an improv troupe, it's like being in like a gang for nerds. So you support each other and you go to stuff and, and so she said she was going to this thing and I was like, okay, so we're going to all sit around and talk about our feelings. Cool. But I'm a nice supportive friend.
Yeah.
So I got there and I sat in the back and I had like my jacket over one shoulder so I could just like make a quick getaway after she had done her like little story or whatever.
Yeah.
And then someone got on the stage and started telling a story. And I like touched my face and I was like, I'm crying. And then I was laughing 2 seconds later. And then I was just like, it was suddenly like I was in a room full of friends, even though I didn't know anyone. It was like a movie. Like, when I haven't had this experience, but I've heard that like when you meet the love of your life, like, that you can't, there's suddenly music and everything is in slow motion. And that's what it was like. I was like, and so I will say it was beautiful. And also my first thought was, oh no, I have to do this now. I have to talk about my feeling. And for years, I've just been making funny jokes that keep everybody at a very clear distance.
Yeah.
So it was just a moment that completely changed my life. And after that, I was like, no matter what I do, I'm different now.
Yeah.
Like, I can't be that same person. And so I still do comedy. I love comedy. It's wonderful. There's a lot of people who are very honest and very willing to take risks. I was not one of those people at that time.
Yeah.
But going to that show made me, it was basically like, put up or shut up. Like, you've
Yeah.
gotta do something more. And so I started, and I was not good at it. And so what I did was I read books and I went to shows and I started a show, and I knew if I just figured it out, quote unquote, if I did enough research,
Yeah.
if I read the right books, I could do it, which isn't true. You can't just read a book and then suddenly you're good at it. It's like business. You just have to keep doing it, and you have to fail a lot, and you have to have uneven growth.
Say it
And then
again.
one day, yeah, you have to fail and you have to have uneven growth.
Yep.
And you have to, every time it's amazing, like, there is also that knowledge that it's going to be bad again. And I have to just accept, because when you get better, you realize that you could be better than that. And so I'm never at like, I'm a really great storyteller now. I am proud of the work that I do.
Yeah.
I can see my growth. I can see how my work has been helpful, and I have a long way to go. And the only way to do that is to just keep going.
What makes a great storyteller?
Honesty is a big one.
Okay.
And also
Are you talking
telling us,
vulnerable honesty, like putting it out there in the
yes,
world how you feel and like
yes,
the hard stuff?
yes, for sure. But I will also say that balanced with, there's an expression, I'm a Canadian storyteller. This is an expression I learned from American storytellers, that you tell from a scar, not a wound. So you're telling your truth in a way that is not going to hurt you because it's too soon. And it's also not going to be unprocessed stuff you're sending out to an audience. So there's a lot of different types of storytelling. I will be honest, like, as much as I'm like, oh yeah, being real and vulnerable, I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Me too.
I still, yeah. I mean, who doesn't? There's
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
but I am not one of them. Um, and if anybody out there is that person, bless you. Good for you. You're like Superman. Like, teach me your ways. Anyways, but I still, comedy is still my voice.
Yeah.
For some people, uh, no jokes, being completely honest and raw, that's a great storyteller. It really depends on your definition. For me, it is something with a beginning, middle, and an end. It has a feeling of some sort of closure. Like, it doesn't have to be, your life is changed forever, but like, we see a change in you in the story. You were one thing, and then through the process of your choices, you learn something, you change. And it doesn't have to be, what I learned is, you trust the audience enough to come along with you and see that change. And the other thing is, honesty that is about kindness and trust with your audience, not
Mhm.
shock value, not, it's not up there. And I say this with all the love in my heart for comedians. You know, when people say, I don't go to therapy, this is my therapy. Also go to therapy. Like, if you're using this for therapy, in my opinion, that's not what storytelling and comedy is supposed to be. It's a relationship between you and the audience. If you are going up there to tell them all your unprocessed problems, you are making them your therapist, and you are asking them to pay for that.
Let's unpack
And
that, if you don't
yes,
mind. Let's
of
unpack that for
course.
a second.
Yeah.
What's the difference between going out there and, like we all, gosh, how do I put this in like a way? Like sometimes people just overload us with stuff. And like us
Yes.
caring people obviously want to be able to help, but sometimes it's like too much too soon. It's like, so how do we
Mhm.
know like how to be vulnerable, but not like, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, burdensome, like, because
Yes.
maybe if you're putting too much on your audience, it's like, now they're like, I was here to watch this. I was here to learn. I was here to feel, but now I just feel like overwhelmed, right? Like, how do you
Yes.
not burden people, but still be vulnerable with this story?
That is the $1,000,000 question, my friend.
Hmm.
So first of all, I actually like burdensome because that word to me also means it's not just like I'm burdened, like the emotional part of it.
Yeah.
It's if you are carrying 3 boxes and someone puts another box on top, you might not be able to carry it. It's not even, and you don't have to be like upset at the person. It's just people can only take so much and different people are different. So I will say, one, anybody out there, at some point you're gonna get it wrong. Or you're not and you're better than me. But I like to think that I'm amazing, so if I've made the mistake, everyone will make the mistake. But at some point, we're all imperfect emotional people. When you're going through something, like, I'm gonna change that. When I have gone through something, there have been times when I am like, at a state where my brain, activity is almost intoxicated
Yeah.
because I'm so stressed and I'm so miserable, and I will tell you, uh, so years ago, I had a really terrible breakup, just really, like, heartbreaking, like, lost a group of friends, all those kinda things. Now I see it as like, "Oh, I went through this thing and I'm, out the other end, and this is fantastic, and I've learned from it."
Yeah.
At the time, I was so miserable, that I would, like, be like at about 1 o'clock in the morning when I was very sad, I'd be like, "You know what'll make me feel better? Some chips." And I would go to the 24-hour grocery store, and I would go buy a bag of chips, um, and because I'd been crying, I didn't want anyone to see, so I wore sunglasses.
Okay.
And then I also wore a hat and a scarf, so it was supposed to look like it was an outfit, not trying to cover my eyes.
Ah.
And then because I'd also been crying, I would buy a cucumber to put on my eyes,
Yeah.
because I would forget that I'd done the same thing the day before because I was so miserable.
Wow.
So there is a grocery store where for like a week when I was at my most miserable, people saw me come in at 1 in the morning like a haunting of the grocery store with a giant hat, sunglasses, and a scarf, buy a bag of chips and an entire cucumber, and then just out at the door. And it didn't even occur to me that that was weird. That's so weird. But I was so sad and
Yeah.
so miserable that I couldn't see the reality of situations.
Do you think part of the difference is like we watch movies, right? And movies are good stories. Otherwise, we wouldn't watch them, you know? And then obviously people tell their stories in lives. But have you ever watched those movies where it's like they leave us hanging at the end and then it's like miserable? We feel left and abandoned. Do you think part of like the point where you start to tell your story, like maybe, and I'm just deciphering this so our audience can maybe like understand it too. And like maybe we need a little bit of clarity at the end of the story or a little bit of a shining light at the end of the story. It's like, it's one thing to tell them, okay, these awful things happen, these 15 things, you know, I don't want to mention awfulness stuff on this show overall. You know, it's like these 15 things happen to me. And then if they just leave you with that, feels like a burden. But if they say these 15 things and now they talk about how they've grown because of it, how the next step is, you know, like that sort of stuff, is that the difference where we don't feel burdened? Now we feel like we're part of a good story.
I love that.
Okay.
I would say one of the things as well, because sometimes you don't have like a lesson or you're not quite sure, or it might be a little uneven.
Yeah.
Um, how does it feel? And before you're telling the story in public, how does it feel? Does it feel like I showed them too soon? Too soon. Is it look at how far I've come? If and you can, and it can still be I showed them, but if it's look at how far I've come. I really showed them. That's a big difference from I showed them, because that is, to me, that's still a wound. That's still your recovering. Can you get through a story without, like, crying? If it's an emotional story, crying a bit is fine. Do you feel out of control? After you tell the story, how does the rest of your day feel?
Yeah.
How are you talking to your partner? How are you talking to someone in the grocery store? If you hear a kid crying, because kids cry, and you're just, like, furious because you're completely, like, activated,
Yeah.
it's too soon.
Yeah.
Pay attention to your life, because that's the thing is, for me, I was for years so cut off from the rest of the world. I was so in my own head that I wouldn't necessarily know when it was time. And now I pay so much attention to my body.
Yeah.
And I would always rather, and this is a bit complicated for business people because we often use stories um, to share who we are and why we're passionate about what we're passionate about. But I would rather wait and tell the version of the story when it is in its final form. That sounds like it's a Pokemon, but anyways, but tell it at its final form, then do a version that's just spiky, for lack of a better term, that it's not going to be. Yeah.
I think that's great insight. And, I tell people all the time with their struggle stuff, and, even my own, like, I have an interesting story. I've gotten every bit of, actually, all my closest friends say I have horrible luck and you need to write a book because all this horrible stuff happens to you all the time. But I don't like, and I used to look at myself as like the Mr. Magoo of life. Do you remember Mr. Magoo? He's like,
Yes.
he like jumps, he was like walking off and like he can't see. And so he's walking off this building and he almost dies, but then this swinging beam saves him, right? Like last second. That's been my life. Like all these things, like I've almost died overseas a couple different times now. And then like
Oh my
the beam
goodness.
swings in the way, or like in business, like this horrible things happen. Beam catches me, just in time. And I used to really like define my life as Mr. Magoo, just saved in the nick of time. And then I learned to like change that thought a little bit. And I developed a story and like paid attention to a story I liked a lot better. And that was the story of Rocky. And Rocky had all these things, in life that like just kept going at him. Like, everything in the world was against him. And like he says something along the lines of life is going to hit you harder than anything else does, right? And all you can do is keep walking forward. And that day I decided, you know what? I'm not Mr. Magoo. I'm Rocky. Like I refuse to give up. And at the same point, it's like, I use Oprah as the example. Maybe that's not people's favorite place to tell a story, but it's like, would Oprah ever have you on if you didn't have a story? You need the bad stuff, right? You need the bad stuff to inspire somebody, and that's why I love actually where we're going with this dialogue, because when is that right time? For me, I've only like, people get out of me in a podcast now. I was just on a guest on podcast. He got all kinds of stuff out of me this week. You couldn't have got that stuff out of me in 15 years being my best friend up until the last year and a half. And so like maybe there's timing in this, like you're saying, it's like it's timing when it's time to tell the story. And Joe Rogan's, just to add this last bit, one of the things that I love that Joe Rogan said is like his favorite story is that guy who like life is shit, right? Like life is awful, like he's done all these things wrong, made all these mistakes. He's got the gun on the counter. He's about to blow his brains out. He looks at a picture of his daughter and he changes his life completely, right?
I mean, that's why people love Paul Schrader movies.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that might be a bad example. Taxi Driver is not like a positive thing necessarily.
But I mean, that's the point. It's like, you know what? This bad stuff happens to us, right? And we can use it to make it part of the story and inspire people. And by the way, if you're out there right now and you have a story and like we're talking about, it's like maybe get to the growth port, so you're healed and ready to tell that story. And you have to tell it. Because, like I wouldn't be anywhere in life if I didn't think people, if the world had only Mark Zuckerbergs that were offered Facebook or, like going to Harvard or McDonald's, like his dad offered him two choices. Mark, you can go to McDonald's, or you can own a McDonald's, or you can go to Harvard. How is that an inspiration for my business story? I wasn't offered those choices, Luckily, we have other business people that came from nothing in this world and made something, of themselves.
For sure.
So
for sure. It is. I've always, it's very funny because I don't think anyone would consider me very punk rock. I'm basically like a cartoon bird who's like loves friendship, but
yeah.
That's what I've always responded to, like a DIY ethic and just pushing yourself and knowing what you want to do and making that happen. And to me, that's the thing about storytelling. It's why I'm so passionate about it, is because every time I hear a story where someone faces up to something, they make active choices, they make a change in their life, I know I can do it too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you're talking about Mr. Magoo, because I'd never thought of this before, but one of the things that's interesting about Mr. Magoo is he just keeps going. Like, all these terrible things happen, and he just, like, something he believes in himself, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Uh-huh.
Like, he just kinda keeps going.
Yeah.
Mr. Magoo, in a way, is like a hero of his own, because like, all these terrible things happen, and he just keeps going
No,
along, being a
nothing
nice,
phases him.
friendly guy.
Although, like,
Exactly.
I love making Mr. Magoo look like a hero. That feels really good to me. But at the same time, I think
Yeah.
he's just aloof on the world. I don't even think he knows these things are about to happen to him.
It's possible, but also, like, I just the fact that as someone who has basically lived with, like, a low-level thrum of anxiety my whole life,
Yeah.
like, in the same way that I love Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm, there's a certain, heroism of just being like, "I'm just gonna go in the world, and off I go, and oh, well." Like, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
That being said, I love Rocky, who doesn't?
Yeah. I mean,
His
it's a
is good.
great story. It's like, and it's one that a lot of, and honestly, I wish I used to be able to quote his phrase, life keeps coming at you, like no matter what, and nobody's going to hit as hard as life. It's just how you can keep walking forward. That's the best business advice I ever heard. Right?
Exactly.
It's all
And
going to hit
also
hard. Keep
oh,
going.
100%. And also, Rocky didn't win the fight.
No. Uh-uh.
That's the thing people forget.
Yeah.
And, like, who, when you say Rocky, thinks, "Oh, you mean the guy that didn't win the fight?" No! You think of him running up those stairs and being amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing about storytelling,
Yeah.
is I think I have this all the time with clients, and honestly, just people I talk to in the world, because I talk about this all the time, clearly, is people think that they have to have this amazing story where they won, where they jumped out of an airplane, where they like won a contest, where they, I don't know, like climbed a mountain. Ooh. Love the idea of it. Seems terrifying. But no, it can be very small. In fact, some of the biggest stories are very small. It is because it connects to people, because everyone has felt left out. Everyone has been scared of something and tried it anyway. Everyone has, had people think they were one way and they're actually another. Those are very common things. In fact, the most relatable stories are often the stories that stick with people.
I mean, are you familiar with the hero's journey?
Oh, yes, I
Yeah,
am.
I figured being a storyteller. So
Yeah.
we have another
Mhm.
podcast. It's called Bully This, a hero's journey. And we
Mhm.
basically walk
Mhm.
people through the hero's journey. And just for the audience, I'm going to hash it out really quick and feel free to weigh in on this. But written by Campbell, who studied like storytelling throughout the world. And it didn't matter whether it was an Asian culture, Indian culture, European culture. He was finding these themes in these historic stories. And so basically, be deep in our being as humans, we are all attached to this emotional story. And it is basically the same timeline over and over again, no matter where you see these stories. We could find an ancient script, from thousands of years ago. And in theory, you'd find this same story that we're all attached to. Like Star Wars was written off of it. And, like that hero's journey. And so we want heroes in the world, and like that journey is no good unless you have to deal with some stuff along the way. Right. And so, and the way, like, if life isn't giving you stuff anyways, which most of it does, and you have to overcome it because it's going to be part of your story. But if it's not giving it to you, then I dare say you're not approaching enough fears.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's my niece who's like almost 3 now. I remember when she was teaching herself to roll over. She's this tiny baby, and she would try so hard that she would fall asleep, and then she would yank herself awake and then just keep going. And this is like a baby where I was like, I am inspired. Like, that is like, that's Rocky to me. Like, I'm like, do 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 do. Like, it's just as she. I don't know, that you might have to cut that out because that might be licensing. But anyways, um, but yeah, like, just this tiny baby. And also, one of the things that I love and find complicated about the hero's journey is that hero is in the title. And so people often are like, well, I'm not a hero. Or like, the thing that I overcame is not the same as this person or that person, that their thing was worse or harder.
Yeah. Somebody
It's
out
not a
there needs to hear your
competition.
story. And I think that's
Exactly.
that's like a big part of what we do these days too. like I have another company, and we really focus on telling stories, right? And bringing good. We have a initiative we call for charity called Content for Good. This podcast is one of them, right? And it's like putting good stories in the world. We actually have a place, and there's a little fireplace here on property, and we invite the older generation. So if you're out there right now and you have a grandparent that has an amazing story, send them our way.
Yeah.
We'll film it for free. We'll put it online because we don't want those stories lost, right? And the only people using this tool for the most part of the younger generation, they haven't had enough time to evolve these wonderful stories. Maybe they have some, but I'm telling you, we're going to lose some stories in the older generation because they don't know how to use this tool here. So come on down, we'll film that
100%.
for you. That's how important we think stories are in the world.
I love that. So I may or may not have told you, my charity thing that I do is, I co-founded a collective. We put out collections of people's true stories on a theme. We've, our third and final one is coming out on April 17th.
That's amazing.
And thank you. And all the money goes to charity, goes to Planned Parenthood this time.
Cool.
And yeah, and I haven't told many people this, but my father has a story in this collection.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's been such an interesting process of having my own father as sort of like a client or someone that I'm editing and learning about him in this way. Like I know my father pretty well,
Yeah.
but I've learned so much more about him, and it's just been a really beautiful, sometimes a bit weird, and wonderful process of getting to know my father more as a person, aside from him as my father. So it is, I love that there's this space, because one of the things I've told him is like, Dad, I'm sure I know a lot of your stories, but just talking to you about this one, I've learned all these things I never knew. If you don't record them in some way, we're going to lose them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And they're important. They're important to me.
Yeah.
And when you were saying someone in your life needs to hear your story,
Yeah.
or someone in the world needs to hear your story, I will say sometimes that person is you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't even have to share that story. Maybe it's for you in the future to look at. Maybe it's for your kids and grandkids. Maybe it's just you needed to get it down on a page.
I truly believe everybody has a story. How do you get stories out of people? Like, what's the process for getting a story out of somebody?
A lot of times it's asking questions. So this is the dream job I never knew I was dreaming of. Because as a kid, one of the things I got in trouble for in school was that I was disruptive because I would talk to other kids and I would ask them questions. And so there would be, this kid looking worried, and I would turn to them and be like, "Oh, how are you?" And like ask them a bunch of questions. And my teacher would be like, "Erin, we have to do math." I'm like, "But he's sad. Like we have to, like, he has to deal with that right now," which, by the way, don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
call out another child's emotion in front of everyone. But like I've always been fascinated by people. I've always asked them a lot of questions. So one of my questions I ask for people, because I have regularly had the pleasure of working with like really wonderful, sensitive people who are also, for some reason, convinced that they don't have anything interesting to talk about. They don't have any interesting stories. And so one of the things is, what is something that you learned in your life that changed you? What is who is the most important person in your life? What is a change that you've gone through? If you could go back 10 years, 20 years in the past and tell yourself something, what would it be?
Yeah.
Because sometimes being like, "Tell me a story," is incredibly stressful. Like that, when I was doing stand up, I often didn't tell people, because the first thing they'll do is like, "Okay, tell me a joke." I'm like, "Out of what? Out of context? No."
Yeah.
Like, and my brain would freeze up, and I'd be like, "I don't know, I got some killer knock knock material. You like that?" Like it's a lot of pressure, but certain, like, who's an important person in your life? What's something that you have learned that you would like to tell your younger self? Like, those kind of things start getting you thinking in that space. If there was a movie or there was a director who did a movie of your life. One of my favorite cues is the story of my life is, and you'll be amazed what will start popping up. And especially if you keep writing, if you give yourself 10 minutes, and that is stressful, start with like 1 minute. But if you write for 10 minutes with that cue and you just keep going, I guarantee you there'll be stuff in there that you are shocked positively by, where you're just like, what? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
That's part of it. You just once you start going, you'll be amazed. It's like panning for gold. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, you see. Except, unlike panning for gold, there's real gold there. Because I don't know, you find real gold when you pan for gold. I watched Bugs Bunny cartoons. It seemed like it was unrealistic.
That's I guess maybe one gift I have is I'm just very fascinated by people in general, and I run across a lot of people in my world, and I can find a fascinating thing about all of them. Every single one. Like there is nobody out there in the world that I don't find fascinating. It's just sometimes it takes a second to get to there. And to your point, it's like they all have a story and they don't even think it's a good one. Most of the best like story people are the ones that don't even know they have a story. That was just like when you live in your normal life, you're immersed into your what is your life. You think it's like not any kind of special, and then like you really dig in, it's like, I didn't know you were into that. I didn't know like like I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head this morning, but it's like like I think everybody has that, and so good for you for finding ways to get people to that. I want to
It
pivot a little
is.
bit. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say it is interesting because I can only speak from my own perspective, but for decades, I was trying so desperately to be normal, um, in quotations, that I was scared all the time. And it was like I'm always going to have a level of anxiety, but it was just like, when people say they were on a hamster wheel? Like, I was on a hamster wheel that was inside another hamster wheel that was, like, inside a series of hamster wheels. I was just anxious all the time. And to me, the most interesting things about people are the ways they're different and weird. And I feel like I can only speak for I mean, I think I could say North American society, definitely Canadian society. Um, is there such a thing of like, don't be weird, don't make waves, which is if you're in business,
Celebrate your
honey.
weirdness. Like
Yeah, exactly.
we do the bullying podcast, and every single episode at the beginning, I quiz my co-host Cliff, and I give him a bunch of hints, and it's a celebrity that was bullied. And 99% of the time, it's that thing that they were unique with early on that was actually
Yeah.
what got them bullied, but then later led to their success. Like Taylor
Oh,
Swift,
for sure.
music.
Yeah.
You got bullied for
Yeah.
music, and now like obviously
Mhm.
look at where that went. So most of the time when people are picking on you about something, that's actually your greatness. That weird thing is actually your greatness. But I want to have enough time to go into stories in business, whys in business. And like one thing I want to give the audience before we start into that topic, and something I've been explaining to like people a lot lately. I work with a lot of new entrepreneurs, and so do you remember the movie Billy Madison?
Sure do.
Yeah, or excuse me, Happy Gilmore. I'm sorry. Do you remember Happy Gilmore?
Oh, yes, 'cause isn't it Happy Madison Productions, so you put the
Yeah,
2 together?
I did.
Yeah,
And
love it,
so
love it.
anyways,
Billy Madison, yes.
you remember the part where it's like, find your happy place,
Yes.
and he's like thinking, and he has that like point where it's like the music, beautiful music starts playing, and the beautiful woman, long blonde hair, fancy outfit comes out. She's got 2 jugs of beer. Grandma's over there shaking her head and smiling at him. It's like that was his happy place, right? And so one thing I tell entrepreneurs these days is do that, right? But instead of thinking happy place, close your eyes and think success, right? What is your success place? And then I'll ask him this follow-up question. It's like, okay, what did you picture what the world says is success? Were you picturing that like fancy car, that
Mm.
fancy house, or did you line into specifics? It's like you pictured your kid, like going to college, or you pictured your wife happy because she gets this beautiful kitchen, or like the point is, it's like if we don't start to define what the success is to us, and we're going by what the world thinks, that definition is what we'll proceed towards. That will be the goal, and it will be the wrong goal. So you have to describe and define your own success first,
Mhm.
in my opinion, to make your story to get there, right? And so that's where I want to go. And like, I think it's important that business does have some sort of why. And that gets tough in entrepreneurship for some people, because it's like, oh, I own a landscaping company. I hate mowing lawns. It's like, but is that landscaping company getting you closer to something that you're passionate about? Are you guys using that to like hire age out foster youth to give them their first job? Another way you could be a why.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah. And
so
are
how
you and your wife in that fancy kitchen, and like you're cooking her dinner and she's having like a margarita and it's great. Like that's the thing is your business, and I'm glad we're talking about this. It doesn't always have to be the dream. It doesn't have to be, what I've always wanted to do, mow a whole bunch of lawns and do it the best. And also, if that's your dream, that is rad.
Forrest
Because
Gump,
I, as a
loved it.
kid, yeah, exactly. And also as a kid, like I always thought that was the coolest thing because there was those, I would like, I'll be on the bus and see people on those riding mowers, and I'm like, best of both worlds. Like
Yeah.
it is, whatever your dream is, that's amazing.
Well, because we don't want to buy any longer, and I bring this up in some of our episodes because it's important. It's like the founder of Walmart, Sam Walton, wrote a book. And this was before social media. And he said, you want to compete with Walmart? You want to know how to compete with Walmart? Because we are this monster company. We're going to put companies out of business. How are you going to compete with me? He tells you personalization. Personalization is that story. These days, it's told through this device mostly. And
Yes,
having a decent why, because the younger generation wants to hear that your business is about something.
definitely. I will also say gently, he shouldn't have had a company that locked people in his store overnight, that work there.
Or made
But
money
I
off
see what you're saying.
his employees' deaths and not give them any.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly. But I see what you're saying,
yeah, I mean,
and I agree.
people want to buy from people they know, or a personalization. Even the big companies now have to find a why. You can't be the big corporate monster anymore. We don't vote for those people anymore, And the younger generation is holding people accountable with this device, social media, and they're also holding people accountable, and they will not purchase from you, right?
Mhm.
I mean, this is the best way to spread. I was just watching there's that. Do you remember that story when the guy saved up all the Pepsi coupons? Remember
Mm.
that? Like, and then there's a documentary out. Like, he had saved up
Yeah,
so many
he was
coupons, and there was a
flying
Harrier
to,
jet
or is he gonna
involved.
that's it, yes.
Yeah. So this Harrier
Yeah.
jet's involved, and he actually did it. He did the calculations. He outsmarted Pepsi. They owed him a Harrier jet, and he had to fight him over it, right? And then at the same time, like it goes into in this documentary how Pepsi had ran this contest in Cambodia, which I just came back from filming our documentary, so it has a close place to my heart. And these poor people went out and bought all these Pepsi points because it was literally going to change their lives if they won this contest. And
Mm.
then Pepsi had made a mistake, and they printed too many winners. So
Yeah.
now, like, they decided not to give anybody, the prize, and all these Cambodians like basically tore Pepsi down over there. It's like that's the stories we need in the world, because we don't need companies that will do those things. I'm impassioned about, like, we need companies that are bettering the world, because business is what runs the world at the end of the day. I don't care what you say about politics. It's business that runs the world. We need good heads of company.
For sure. Do you know about, the story about Cavassier? I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it because it's too fancy for me.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um,
I don't know the story.
so so it's a specific, well, I didn't just tell you, like, a specific story. So, it's about Cavassier and, rappers and rap music. So, for a while, in a lot of rap videos, you would see Crystal, and you would hear them rap about Crystal and, like, all kinds of, amazing, successful rappers, like, known worldwide. We're talking about Crystal. And apparently, the Crystal company itself, not super into that. That was not their brand identity.
Yeah.
Uh, why? Who knows? Question mark. But that was not what they were into. And so they ruined that relationship. And I can't remember the rappers because I if I knew I was talking about this, I would have researched it more. So I apologize for some of the details. But uh I believe it's a Busta Rhymes song called "Pass the Cavassier," which was like, "Hey, you don't think we're good enough for your thing that we have advertised for free? For okay, we're into Cavassier now." And the sales of Cavassier went through the roof, and the sales of Cristal went down significantly.
Business owners, I mean, the heads of companies are so disconnected, and there's so many, small business people. That's one thing you have going for you. It's like, and put people around you that aren't afraid to tell you like the hard truths too, and have a discussion, because too many people in the corporate world are too afraid to say anything. And quite often, these big businesses, they don't make good decisions. And it's because everybody's yes people, right? It's like, don't be a yes person. We have to get to
Yeah.
stories though. So
Oh,
what
for
is
sure.
what
So
is
that yes. Sharing your story to me is to help people know you. And it is the thing you were talking about with Walmart, where it's like there's this faceless corporation, or there's my friend Jenny.
Yeah.
And so, even though these might be people that you don't know personally, when you share your story, it is a way that you connect deeply. So, I've seen people tell a story on stage who I have never met. Like, I saw them, I had to go, didn't even get a chance to say, that was a great story afterwards. And I feel like they're my friend
Yeah.
because I know something important about them. I know that they, just like me, have gone through struggles. I know that they've changed. I know all of those certain things. So to me, business storytelling is about them getting to know you. And often it's, why did you create
Yes.
this business? What is the problem you're solving, and why is that important? Because a lot of underdog entrepreneurs, you saw something that was missing, you saw something that was wrong, you saw something you could offer a solution for, and then you created a business around that. And that is very inspiring.
Do you know the story of Yvon Chambord? Might have murdered his name, from Patagonia.
Mhm. I don't know.
So
Yeah,
it's
anything that involves being out in nature is terrifying to me, so I probably don't know that story.
Well, and to that point, he was a mountain climber, huge mountains, and basically he wanted the mountains to be available for younger generations. He wanted them to be able to experience nature the way he was experiencing it. So he could have went out and started a charity, right? And maybe he had some rich friends. He could have made a couple $1 million worth of impact on saving the planet, sort of stuff. And instead, he went out and opened Patagonia, which everybody knows for the most part. And every single item that was sold, he gave an X percent to combat climate change, to save the
Mm.
world, that sort of stuff. Every piece of clothing, for-profit business, right? And then he actually, big news, like 6 months ago, he's retiring. His shares are worth $3.6 billion. He gave all that towards the same charity. He made more impact than anybody in the world ever has towards this. And he did it by starting a for-profit company as opposed to a
Amazing.
charity. Couple $1 million
Yeah.
maybe with some friends over here, billions plus the money
Yeah.
all the way along the way. And so, like, I think the point I'm trying to make, and and you're trying to make around telling a good story, you're saying tell a good story. I believe it. I believe that, like, that should be a banner, but then also move in your why, like you're saying, like move in your why to that story and let people know that story about your business. Have your business stand something. And I tell people, I'm like, all the time, this is something I'm known for. Do something you hate in the world. Don't do something you love. Do something you hate. Do something you can't stand, and start a business that's going to solve that thing you hate. Right? And
Mhm.
and that could be, I make it really dramatic because that's where I work. I hate the
Mhm.
fact that the foster care system and the way it works. So I start things to help with that. I hate the fact that there's a lot of bad information online. So we start content for goods. I hate that we look at the wrong type of heroes. We have a charity that involves us traveling around the world, finding founders of amazing organizations. I hate that small business gets picked on. So I do this, and then we have a small business tech company that we're working on. It's like, so it can be something as simple as, like, I hate the fact that you can't get a good burger in this town with good customer service. you know?
Mhm.
And then, like, I would also say one further, it's like, start something within that business that makes an impact, hire age out foster kids, like maybe help sponsor the soccer team. It's like small business does more impactful stuff, and the world wants to hear and support people that are doing that stuff. Don't make it a gimmick. Make it part of your heart.
Yeah.
I know there's something that's in there that you're passionate about, that you don't like, that you want to change. Make that part of your business, even if it's a landscaping company or a hamburger shop.
For sure. So one of the things I often tell to clients is watch a couple Frank Capra movies, specifically It's a Wonderful Life.
Love that movie.
Because he saves the town. That's the story, is this man who thinks he's not important. Like, I'm getting emotional. I've seen this movie 80 times.
Yeah.
And he just thinks he's this regular guy, and there's all these people whose lives have been changed because of him, and also because of his business. Because that, like, loan company, bank company, I don't know what it was, but, like, was able to make sure that people had houses and that sort of stuff, and fought Potter, who didn't care about anyone in the town.
Well,
And so
sorry, I was going to say, to your point, because I want to back it up a little bit. I mean, Potter is the definition of success. Everybody in the US, your definition of success right now, if you close your eyes, is Potter. You know, what is true success, right? Is true success the person with the Ferrari out there that's not doing anything? Or is it the teacher that's had 800 students email her and said, I became a teacher because of you? You know?
Yeah.
Is success the guy that we just visited in Cambodia who gave up every dime that he had, including his mansion, his fancy career in Hollywood, and now he's got 1,700 kids and he's the hero of an entire country? Is that success? You know, it's right. We're defining success wrong, you know, and that even in your business, define success better, you know, make it like it has to be monetized. You're not going to do anything any good for anybody if you're struggling, if you can't eat, you know, it's like you need those resources. But make it about more. And I promise you, if you make it about more, you won't quit it either, because it's now a mission within your business. And a life mission needs a good story.
I agree. And that's why, for me, It's a Wonderful Life is such an important tool.
Yeah.
Because we see this very ordinary guy, just a regular guy. You probably know a million of that guy. And we see how important he is to so many people. And so to me, it is when people are like, oh, I don't have anything that important, or I haven't done anything that important. I tell them to watch that movie because it just really shows that the ordinary is extraordinary.
Beautiful.
And so after you've seen that movie, what I'm going to say is, what is a thing that someone else has done for you that has changed your life? A small thing, a small kindness. And then we're going to start finding those in your life. And who was a relative that inspired you as a kid, and that's part of the reason that you're doing the work that you do now.
Totally.
So exactly. There's a story I tell a lot. Years ago, I was lucky enough to work for a union, helping them work to find stories, their members to find stories to go and lobby and talk to politicians. And there was this guy, and so part of the contract was doing some coaching with different people. And so there was this guy, he had booked an appointment, and it had been for, I don't know, like 8:00 on a Tuesday morning. And as someone who gets up in the morning, but like, it's not my favorite time of the day, I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I'm ready. I'm on my Zoom call. It's 8:30. It's 8:35. It's 8:40. I closed the computer. I was like, and like an hour later, I get this email. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I slept through. I got home from my night shift, sat down and fell asleep. Is there any way you can meet now? And I immediately went from thinking like, what a selfish person to be like, you were going to do that after doing a whole night shift. Cool. Yes, we will meet whenever you want. And we got on the meeting, and immediately he said, I have wasted your time twice because I have nothing. I'm so sorry. I have nothing at all. And then we just started talking. And he was telling me about his mom. So he was born here in Canada. His mom is his family's from China. His mom, I believe, only speaks Cantonese. And she was a Molly maid for years. And at one point, she got injured at work. And they couldn't get the help they needed because, like, there wasn't English stuff to help, but, like, when she would call to, like, try to make a claim, nobody spoke Cantonese, like, it was a whole nightmare, and so she was off for as long as she could, which was not very long,
Yeah.
and then she had to go back to work, and what he said was like, "I feel so much shame because I was the one English speaker and I didn't do anything." And I went, "How old were you?" He's like, "Oh, like 15." I was like, "You were 15 years old. What were you gonna do? You had to go to school, like, what were you gonna do? You were 15." I'm like, "And now you go and you lobby the government to make sure that doesn't happen to other families."
I
That's your hero story, my friend.
Beautiful.
You're exactly who you needed.
Yeah, and your circumstances gave you that. Like, it's
Exactly.
we had a person on the last season of our last episode, and she's from Canada. She works
Mm,
actually with a lot of youth bullied kids. And she said, "You know what? I'm simply trying to be the hero in life I wish I had." And that's why, like, I'm so passionate about bringing underdogs to success too, because it's like they change systems. Your story that you just told, he's changing that
mhm.
system because he was involved in that system, and there's nobody better to change that system because he has the story, right?
Yes.
And that story is
And I
what
think
drives him.
about exactly, and I think about it 3 times a week. And that
I,
was years ago. Like, it's wild. When I'm feeling low, I think about that. When I'm feeling like, "Oh, what am I doing in the world?" Because everyone gets that way where it's like, "Is what I'm doing of any use?" Especially when you're tired. And I was like, "He was who he needed. How can I be who I needed?"
it's such a good point to tie in to your story. And like one thing I want to hit too, because it's like it brought up something. It's like in the hero's journey, right? There's Luke Skywalker. We'll use Star Wars because everybody understands that. He's the hero, right? And through his journey, he has some help, right? One of the guiding principles in all these stories is there's some help, somebody to show them kind of the way, the Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? And so I would say bootstrappers out there, you're Luke, right?
Yeah.
But seasoned entrepreneurs out there, you're Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like you have
Mm,
that chance to be that guiding hand along that story. And so
for sure.
like your story might start by being the hero, not knowing anything, having to go through all these battles, having like some guidance along the way to ultimately solve this business problem, whatever you're working on in life. But then I think that's when you go back into the cycle and you become Obi-Wan, right?
Yeah.
And maybe
And I
like,
think
go ahead.
oh, sorry, I love that. But I was gonna say, I think because, as somebody who is a devoted Star Wars, fan, sometimes it can feel like a lot of pressure to be Luke.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is what I call the David Bowie method, which is changes, is what are changes I've made? Changes I've made in my life, big or small, changes I've made in my business, changes that my business has made. There's certain things that my storytelling business has done for other people, and I keep a record of those things.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing when we're talking about when is a story too soon, write it down now. Maybe look at it in a couple months. Maybe look at it in a couple of years. It might not be the time to tell it now. Doesn't mean it's not the time to record it.
Sure.
To get that information down because you will forget things. I always recommend people do a record every day of things that have happened. Do I do it all the time? No, I don't, but I try. And looking back, especially the early days of my business versus now, one, I see how much I've changed. I see the things I've learned, and it gives me these elements. So when I'm telling the story of my business and of myself and that sort of thing, I can see the specifics, how I changed compared to even if people have identical, like, hey, I was a person, I started, we were talking about like a lawn care business, it raised up my family, and now I'm here. You could
Yeah.
have a bunch of people with that identical story, but who they are is going to give a different version of that story. And it's going to give the specifics and the color and make you fall in love with them specifically.
I mean, that's absolutely beautiful. And the other thing, like Luke wasn't Luke always, right? He had to go through something and he had to build. So I tell people it's like life to me is like building your video game avatar. Tyler goes out and reads a book. Guess what? That little bar of smart intelligence goes up. Tyler goes out and lifts weights. That health and that strength bar goes up. It's like, to have an incredible story, to have an incredible mission, you have to build an avatar, right? Every day you have to be building this avatar for this story that you want, right? And you have to approach these hard things. And to some of us, those hard things are like, getting up in the morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's easy for me, right? That's not a hard one for me. Getting on
Tell
this
me your
camera.
secret.
Yeah, getting on this camera, I don't have a secret,
Yeah.
but getting on this camera, that's a hard thing for me, and that's, for some people, it's not a hard thing. So it's like, define your hard, approach those fears. That's where you grow the most. Get yourself a mighty avatar that you're constantly improving every single day of the week. Have a lofty mission, and now you're developing your story, I think.
100%. And I also think, here's the thing, and I'm gonna swear, and I hope that's fine.
Yes.
People love fuck ups.
Yes.
That is, I'm gonna misquote it, because I tend to misquote smart things. But the idea of, like, Americans, and I'm gonna say Canadians as well, love like a third act.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Have you ever been in a room where everyone seems perfect, and then one person leans over and goes like, "Oh my God, this food, I'm gonna fart." Like, and then you're like, "Ah, this is the best. This is my friend."
Yeah.
That's the thing, is one of the things that is always a challenge for people and me. It's not just my clients. Anything that my client has said, I guarantee you I have said as a resistance as well. Is like, "Oh, people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear. They want to see, they want to trust me. They want to see I've got it all together. They don't want to know how in the first days of business, I lost a bunch of invoices because I put them down and then, like, my cat knocked them in a corner." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Of course they do.
Yeah.
Because we already see where you've gotten to. We want to be like, oh, it's my friend who is just like me and is imperfect."
We need to know that everybody's went through it. And not only that, but your mistakes, you can let them define you. You can let that mistake be the defining moment of your life, or you can do so much good stuff because of that. It can all shadow in comparison. All your mistakes can be a shadow in comparison to your good work if you'll let it drive you forward. And
I'm also gonna gently reframe that,
yeah,
because I love that. But here's the thing. You can also let your mistakes and problems define you, but you just change what the definition is.
beautiful. And
Yeah.
with that being said, as much as I hate to do it, I hope we helped you define a story a little bit today. I want to give you a second to drop anything you want to drop before we close out the episode.
Sure. You can find me at Story Star Coaching. I'm also going to put a special link, going to put a special page on my website for your listeners. It's going to have some little free stuff to help them start finding their stories for their business. And I am also on Instagram as Erin Rogers Story Coach. But the most important thing that I want to tell you is, I want to hear your story. Share it with the world, because you are making the world better by putting that story out there, as long as you've processed it.
Yes. Oh, I want to thank you so much for coming in today. Stick around for a second. I'm going to sign us out of here. Bootstrappers, game changers, underdogs, thank you so much for joining us today. The world would be no good without a story. And not only that, but if nobody told their story, we would never have hope we could get there. We'd never be inspired. So somebody out there, I guarantee it, needs to hear your story. And the world needs more good stories. Involve your story in your business, in your mission of passion, and you will never fail in business. And I believe in life too. Thank you all. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, sorry.